So, okay, so I have to welcome again everybody here. And so it's a pleasure to us to have today uh, the presenter who is Colleen Meyers. Colleen, I don't, I don't, do you want to
Okay, here I
present?
am.
Yes, okay, thank you, Colleen. And so Colleen, she's going to present herself and she will be leading the presentation today.
Okay, so I probably want to share my screen now so we can see the information. Um, okay, so, oh, it's not advancing. Lori,
Yes.
yeah, I
Are you
can't get
hitting
the
your
slides.
downward arrow on
Yes,
your
I'm
keyboard?
using the downward arrow, but nothing's changing.
I can see the agenda slide.
Yes, I'm trying to get to the next one. Well, let me just go ahead, but I need to figure out how to move through the slides. So let me start by just telling you about myself. There's some information about me on a slide, but my name is Colleen Meyers. I'm retired from the University of Minnesota, where I worked with international teaching assistants for more than 30 years. And actually, I recognize someone who's here today, Sarah Tipton. I wanted to say hi to Sarah. She and I worked with international teaching assistants and met each other at the International TESOL conference. In addition to that, I have done some teacher training in Turkey. I did a Fulbright there and worked with teachers to teach them how to teach pronunciation. And now that I'm retired, I'm still doing some work, but it's more of the volunteer type. I work with adult basic education students, and also I occasionally will give workshops like this one today. So it's a lot of fun now to be able to sit back and share some of what I've learned over the years with others in this capacity. So in terms of what we're going to do today, as you can see on the slide, we've done the introductions. I'm going to talk, or we're going to talk a little bit about mirroring and the process that's involved, share some examples so that you not only hear about it, but you can also see what it is. And there will be time, as we mentioned, if you have questions, just type something in the chat, or hopefully we'll have time at the end for longer questions. Okay, so I still can't move through the slides though, so I'm not sure what's going on here. Maybe I'll have to have Lucia. Can you advance the slides for me?
Yes, of course. I have already the presentation. I'm sharing my screen. Lori, can you see my screen? Like today's purpose?
Yes.
Okay, I can't see it. I'm still on the first slide here.
Colleen, stop sharing your screen.
Okay. Okay, now I can see it. So then, Lucia, you'll just continue then.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So the purpose for today, as you can see, applying the mirroring project to your context. So doing a little bit with looking at a student and trying to identify what's going to help that student be more understandable when they speak English, describing the project and why it can be effective. Some people might say, well, why should I even do this as a tutor? And then identify best practices for the project. So next slide, Lucia. Okay, the presenter, I already talked a little bit about myself, so we can skip that and go on to the next one. So the first thing is the mirroring project. What is it and why is it important? Okay, Yolanda says she no longer sees the slides. So there's an issue there. Can everybody else see the slides? Okay, I see some people nodding. Okay.
Yolanda, I want to make sure that you are in speaker view.
How do
In the
I?
upper right corner of your screen, your Zoom window, make sure you're choosing speaker.
Okay, I'll give that a try. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so Yolanda, can you see now?
I actually cannot, but go ahead and continue for everyone else's sake. I'll just follow along.
Okay. Sorry that that's not working for you. Hopefully it'll work out. So the mirroring project, what is it and why should we do it? So next slide, Lucia. Okay, so rather than telling you about it, we thought that the best way would be to actually show you what the project is like. And so I'm going to show you a clip of a video from YouTube. And we call this the model speaker. So somebody that the students want to imitate in terms of learning how to improve their English. And so I had a student who was in nursing and he chose Atul Gawande. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's a doctor and he's written several books. And so my student chose a short segment from How Do We Heal Medicine? So let's take a look at this. And as you're viewing it, I'd like you to notice how he speaks, how he uses body language, the gestures that he uses, his facial expressions, those sorts of things. So what makes him a good speaker? Okay, so go ahead, Lucia.
Last year, we're in the deepest crisis of medicine's existence due to something you don't normally think about when you're a doctor.
It's not clear to me. Can everybody else hear it? No, it's muffled. I don't know what the problem is.
You could try clicking on the YouTube link, Colleen, and see if you can share it that way. Maybe there's some buffering with the PowerPoint.
Okay, so I'll have to.
If you just click on the YouTube link in the bottom of that window of Atul's screen.
Okay. Now I lost it though. Lucia, can you get me back to that slide? Okay, I'm on the first slide here.
Okay.
Okay, so I can see it now. All right, so Lori, you were saying to, whoops, all of a sudden it's showing other slides here. It skipped ahead to.
Oh, I can just share my screen. Where on that video did you want to start?
Okay, I believe it's on the actual slide itself. It says the number.
Yeah, I don't have that now. What minute?
1 minute, 3 seconds.
Can you hear that?
Okay.
No, we cannot hear this.
Yeah, I can't hear it.
I'm not sure why that is.
I could hear it.
The video?
Yes.
Yeah, I see in the chat.
I can hear it as well.
I can hear it also.
And can you see it at the same time?
Yes.
Oh, okay, because I have a different slide up on my screen.
I don't think the voice was synced, but that's okay. With the lips.
Should I continue playing it, Lucia and Colleen? Or
Maybe if it's easy to go to YouTube, we can go to the video and we can go to that section
that's
and
what
show
I'm
it.
sharing. I'm sharing that. I just stopped it because somebody said they couldn't hear it.
I can hear something, but it sounds like it's in the background. So, well, maybe while Lori is trying to figure that out, I can just talk you through this. So basically, Atul Gawande is giving a presentation. It's a TED Talk, and he is trying to answer the question that's here: how do we heal medicine? And so he talks about healthcare in the United States and whether it's, you know, the insurance companies that are the problem, is it doctors that are the problem? And he says the answer is yes and no. And then he says it's deeper than all of that. So basically, that's his main point. And that's the part that my student decided that he would mirror. And so basically, mirroring, we'll see in just a second here, is when the student sees a video, listens to the video, and tries to imitate exactly what the person says, but not only what the person says, but also what they look like. Because for instance, when people are speaking, especially if they're good speakers, they don't just sit there and speak in a monotone, but they use gestures. They say, well, today we're going to talk about medicine and how solving medicine is really important. And so if you can get students to pay attention to how good speakers speak, and it's not even in TED Talks, but also even in sitcoms, movies, TV programs. Maybe in the chat right now, you can notice, has anybody here observed speakers, and they could be native speakers or proficient non-native speakers, how they use body language. So go ahead and type things in the chat while we're waiting for Lori to come back.
I think if I stand.
Whoops, now the video is to the next one. Have people been putting anything in the chat? I don't see. Oh, here. Okay. Susan, maybe it just takes a minute here. Susan says facial expression, hand gestures. Yes, definitely. Anyone else? Moving about the stage. Yes. Effective speakers don't just stand there in one spot, but they move around and they move with a purpose. Tone of voice. Yes, a couple of people said tone of voice. So a good speaker doesn't just speak in a monotone, you know, hi, my name is Colleen, but rather, hi, my name is Colleen. Okay, so they have that intonation, that up and down in their speech that makes it more attractive. Use of notes and eye contact when giving a speech. Yes. Some people have notes, but they don't read, they don't look down, but they actually look at the audience. But somebody else said too, eye contact. Yeah, physically moving. Okay, so people are getting at some of the features of good speakers when they're talking and how their body moves. And I don't know if you've noticed, but what is the connection between body movement and pronunciation? Have you ever thought about that? Okay, so somebody, Mary said emphasis. Yes. Oftentimes when we're trying to emphasize something, then we move our body. So for example, you might say, it's really, really cool. So I don't know if you can see me, but I might move my hands and say, it's cool. I open my eyes, and that helps to make that word stand out. And some non-native speakers will not realize that, or maybe they do in their own language, but they may not do it when they're speaking English. And so that's something to draw their attention to. Okay, so Lucia, do you know where we are in the slides? Are we?
Yes, so now we have the video from S, imitating a model speaker.
Okay,
So
let's hope this works. So this is my student who was a nursing student, and currently he's a nurse. He graduated and he's practicing as a nurse. So let's watch him.
Okay. First, are you looking the slide with the mirroring project final version?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I will play the video, and please let me know if you can hear it clearly.
Mm-hmm.
it will be much better than, sitting.
Okay, all
Yes.
right, go ahead.
Can you hear the video now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Also, okay. Colleen, what about you, Colleen?
Yes, I can hear it. And
see it? Okay. Perfect.
Yes.
Let me bring this closer so when I stand there, my face is shown. Yeah. Okay, ready? In the last few years, we realized we were in the deepest crisis of medicine's existence due to something you don't normally think about when you're a doctor, concerned with how you do good for people, which is the cost of healthcare. There's not a country in the world that now is not asking whether we can afford what doctors do. The political fight that we've developed have become one around whether it's the government that's the problem, or is it insurance companies that are the problem? And the answer is yes and no. It's deeper than all of that.
Okay, so that's the end. If I don't know if you were able to see the original, but he did a great job of pausing like Atul Gawande did and using his body language. Is it yes, or it's yes and no? And so this is basically the project in a nutshell. The students see the model and then they imitate it, but they imitate everything, not just the words, but how the person says the words and how the person moves their body. Okay, so let's go through step by step and see how this happens. So Lucia, can you advance? Okay, so basically, and it says here, imitate a native speaker or a comprehensible non-native speaker. So you might say, okay, why do my students want to imitate a non-native speaker? And actually, we'll talk more about that later when I show an example. But either one would be appropriate for them. A presentation or a dialogue. So it can be a speech like my student did, but also a dialogue from TV, from a movie, whatever. It takes about 2 to 3 hours. So plan that amount of work or that amount of time. And then I put here a period of 1 to 3 weeks. Now, of course, it depends on how often you see the student, how motivated they are. But I will be available later via email. If anybody has questions, feel free to contact me and I can offer some guidance if you need it. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but some people who have seen the presentation are already familiar with shadowing. Is anybody here familiar with shadowing? Okay, so one person here, anybody else? Okay, so it doesn't look like a lot of people are, but I just wanted to make the point that mirroring is not just imitating the speech, but as I mentioned, actually mirroring the verbal and nonverbal communication, performing for a peer or for a tutor. In your case, it will be for you, or if you work with 2 students at a time, maybe they could perform for each other. So it's up to you. It's important that you find somebody that the student identifies with. So, and we'll talk more about this later, but not just somebody whose video is on YouTube, but it's really important that there has to be a connection, someone that you want to sound like. I don't know how many of you speak a second language or even more than a second language? Can you raise your hand? I can see some people. Okay, so some of you do, some of you don't. It doesn't matter, but oftentimes people who speak other languages know someone that they try to sound like. So maybe they have a friend who's from Mexico and they say, oh, when I speak Spanish, I want to sound like that friend. Or maybe if they live in another country, they say, oh, I want to sound like my friend who lives down the street. So that's the idea behind it. And along with that is communicating the emotions and the purpose of what you're doing. So when you think about it, if you say even one word, you could give it a different emotion. So for example, I could say to you, hello, or I could say, hello, or I could say, hello. And so just taking the same word, I can put different emotions to it. And so one of the beautiful things about this project is that you can help the students identify the underlying purpose of the way people speak, at least for one example, and then hopefully later they can apply that to other situations. Okay, so again, if there are any questions, feel free to put something in the chat so I can see there. Okay, so why do it? It says integrate into the curriculum. Well, you're volunteers, but you can still integrate it into your curriculum. Students later will say it's fun and engaging. Even now when I'm just tutoring in more of a volunteer capacity, students will say, oh, this has been a lot of fun. I really like this project. And some students have even said, can we do another mirroring project? So one isn't enough. They want to do several. It's contextualized. So sometimes when you try to learn English, you just learn a sentence, especially at the beginning levels, and the sentence isn't tied to anything. So for example, the rat is on the table. Well, how many times would you say a rat is on the table unless you live in a terrible place where there are rats there? You know, it's not a very useful phrase, but this is a whole context. And it's authentic speech. Okay, some people might argue, well, if you have a TV program or a movie, it's not completely authentic, but I think it's authentic enough. It's very close to the way people really speak. Okay, next slide, Lucia. Okay, so there are 3 phases in the project, and don't worry because I have a handout later that I'll share with you that talks about it. But the first one is the analysis phase, where the student or you choose the model, then you transcribe, you write down what they say, and then you analyze the speech. And don't worry if you're not a linguist or not trained in linguistics. There are just a couple of things that you want to look for. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. It's something that most native speakers can do. And even if you don't do it perfectly, you'll be able to do it well enough to help the students. The second phase, oh, just a second, Lucia, if you can go back, is the mirroring phase, where they actually practice and perform 2 versions, what we call a trial version and the final version. And then finally, something called the channeling phase, so that you can apply, or that the student can apply what they've learned to new content, so they can bridge the gap from learning this with a video to using it in their own speech. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the analysis phase. Next slide. Okay, so here you have 2 choices. Either your learner can choose a video, or you can choose a video. And if you're not sure which video, you know, because YouTube has, you know, billions of videos probably. I have some handouts with examples, or, again, you can contact me and say, would this be a good video or not? But in just a minute here, we're going to talk about videos and what might make a good model or a poor model. Okay, so let's look at the next slide. Okay, in the chat. So here's where you guys are going to be involved. I'd like you to write down, and don't worry, just off the top of your head, when you think about an example, what might make an effective model or what might make an ineffective model. So go ahead and I'll give you about a minute, and then type in the chat what comes to mind, and we'll share that together. Okay, I'm going to start going through these. You've brought up some really good points. So clear speech needs to be somewhat concise. Okay, job interviewer. Yes, if your students are preparing for a job. Ineffective model might be a child. A child could be effective, but for the most part, maybe not. Someone who speaks clearly, engaging, yes, very important. A lecturer, yes, a lecturer is often. A teacher or tutor, yeah, I actually, once a student wanted to mirror me, and so she had a video of me teaching and she did that. Speaker has similar interests to learner, yes, we saw that with Atul Gawande. Appropriate vocabulary level, yes. Especially if you're working with a low-level student or even a very high-level student. Effective movement, eye contact with audience. Emotion, yeah, someone who shows it effectively. Practical for the learner. Something that the student is interested in or already understands. Good rhythm. Speaking clearly with a lot of jargon, yes. All excellent points here. Shows the whole body. Yes, if you only just see maybe from the chin up, it might not be effective because you might not be able to see the gestures. On the other hand, I don't think people have mentioned what makes an ineffective model except for a child, but things like someone who speaks in a monotone. So their speech is at the same pitch level. Someone who's very boring. Maybe someone, as we said, who doesn't move. Someone who just stands on the stage. So those are some things that go into making an effective or ineffective model. Okay, so Lucia, let's go to the next slide. So I mentioned a non-native speaker as a model. And one of my students from El Salvador chose Shakira. And so you might say, well, why choose someone who's a non-native speaker? And maybe some of you can put in the chat why it might be good to choose somebody who's a non-native speaker. But as we watch her, we'll be talking a little bit about that. But what I'd like to do is Lucia is going to play just a short clip. This is a speech that Shakira gave in Qatar, and she was talking about education. So after you're done listening, write down some things that she does that might make her a good model. Okay, so go ahead, Lucia.
Growing up in my country, when I was around 8 years old, I remember I saw kids my age who, instead of being in school, were already working in the streets, were barefoot in the park, kids like me, whose reality was completely different than mine, only because of the circumstances into which they were born. It was really hard for me to accept that something so unjust didn't have a solution. There had to be something that could be done. So I often asked myself why the adults around me were so resigned to the fact that these kids, who were just like me, or even their own children, were living in a parallel reality so different and so cruel.
Okay, so go ahead and write your comments. Why is she a good model? Or maybe if there's something about her that makes her not such a good model. Okay, people are still writing, and feel free to continue to write. You're coming up with some wonderful answers. So choosing non-native might be good for the purpose of listening to various dialects is a great point. And also, a student can relate well to the non-native speaker. So we talk a lot in pronunciation training about not having to sound perfect. That instead, if you can be understandable to the listeners, that's enough. Because how many non-native speakers, especially if they learn English as an adult, will sound like someone who was born here? It's very, very difficult. But somebody like Shakita is very understandable, but she's a non-native speaker of English. Effective use of pauses. Yes, she has great pauses. Facial expressions. She personalizes what she has to say. Yes, so important. Kids like me, she talks about. Eye contact. She's not reading. She's looking at the camera. Clear sense of conviction. Yes, she's determined. Speaks clearly. Good pace. A lot of students have been in her shoes. Good diction. Slower speech can be more effective. Okay, so Kristen, are you saying that she should be a little slower? Is that what you mean? Go ahead and unmute, Kristen.
Yeah, please.
No, some of my learners try to speak more quickly, and then the words come all together. So she took each word.
Yes, thanks for clarifying, and I totally agree that slower speech like her is better than trying to speak very, very quickly, which some students do. Speaks with emotion, very expressive, slowly and with sincerity. Close approximation with remaining accent. She has a slower pace. She has a cause. Yes, all of these are wonderful. And I would say, I don't have anything to add here. I think a couple of the most important ones are that she's attainable. She's a non-native speaker, and she does vary. So the student could choose from one section or another, or maybe focus on how she changes when she's emphasizing. She might get a little faster for something that's less important. She might get a little slower if she's really trying to drive home a point. Okay, so great. Let's move on. Okay, so step 2 is just asking the student to look at the big picture. So who's speaking? what is her role or purpose, and how is she doing that? So before we get into the nitty gritty, we start with the big picture. And again, not every little detail, not every little sound, but how is she doing that? Is she speaking fast or slow? Is she pausing? Is she using body language, etc.? Let's see, Linda has a question. How long should the model video be? I would say 30 seconds, no longer than 1 minute. And it's because they're going to be memorizing it. Not all at once. We'll talk about the stages, but yes, great question. For lower level students, maybe even shorter. And I have a really good video that I think would be good for lower level students. Okay, next slide, Lucia. Okay, now we've kind of talked about this, but let's just take another listen to Shakira and talk about how does she feel about her topic and her audience, and how does that impact how she speaks. So some of you have already addressed that, but let's just think again how she puts those together. Okay, so go ahead and play the video.
Growing up in my country, when I was around 8 years old, I remember I saw kids my age who, instead of being in school, were already working in the streets, were barefoot in the park, kids like me, whose reality was completely different than mine, only because of the circumstances into which they were born. It was really hard for me to accept that something so unjust didn't have a solution. There had to be something that could be done. So I often asked myself why the adults around me were so resigned to the fact that these kids, who were just like me, or even their own children, were living in a...
Okay, so I think that's probably enough. So hopefully at this point you can see the connection there between the way that she feels about her topic and her audience and how she speaks. Maybe in the interest of time, I'll just kind of share a couple of things. So as we already mentioned, she's passionate. She engages with the audience by using I, telling her own story. And she does that by her rate. As some people said, she speaks more slowly. She pauses. She uses body language. Kids like me. Okay, so pointing to herself. And she uses emphasis or stress and intonation. She doesn't just speak at the same level, but she varies her voice when she wants to highlight something. So she's a good model. Okay, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat as we go along. Okay, so I just wanted to share, I don't know what everybody's background is in terms of pronunciation. And as I mentioned, you don't have to be a linguist or you don't have to have background in pronunciation. But this is something that I really like. It's a visual from Linda Grant, who's written a great pronunciation book called Clear Speech. And maybe you've noticed with some of your students that when they speak and they give equal emphasis to each syllable. So they might say something like, today I want to go to the store. You know, so everything is the same emphasis. But if you listen to North American English, we normally have some words or some syllables, I should say, not words, although it could be a word, that are very, very short. And then we have ones that are longer, that are stretched out. So this has 3 motorcycles, but if we had only 1 motorcycle and a car, we could say today. So today. Okay, so that would be an example. So you might say, I want let's see, there would have to be 3 motorcycles. I want to go to, well, this doesn't fit. I had an example earlier, but I don't have it. But anyway, what happens is that you have one word that often comes at the end that's more emphasized. So for example, my name is Colleen. So Colleen would be the bus. That's the word that gets the most emphasis. And then you have name, which might be a little bit longer. My name is Colleen. So I know this doesn't correspond exactly, but I hope that you get the idea. And what we're going to be focusing on today is just the pausing. So in that whole sentence, you would pause after Colleen, and then you would probably put emphasis or highlight the name Colleen. I come from Minnesota. Okay, so Minnesota would be like the bus, that would have emphasis, and that would be at the end. Okay, so does that make sense? If not, feel free to write something in the chat or we can talk about it later. But basically, it's a difference between many languages. Let's see, it looks like Bill has a question. Yeah.
No, I was just trying to say, I was using that to indicate. Yeah.
Perfect. And I think that's the sentence I had before. Yes, thank you so much, Bill. I want to go to the store on Monday. Well, wait a minute. It wouldn't quite work because Monday has stress on the first part. So the bus would be over here, but you almost got it right. I want to go to the store on, okay, and then Monday has 2 syllables. So there would be one more motorcycle, but that's okay. You got it. It makes sense. Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, next one. Next slide, Lucia. Okay, so the main thing is, as I said, focusing on pausing and what we call thought groups. Thought groups are chunks. So speaking in a whole phrase. So for instance, if a student says, I want to go to the store on Monday, it's hard to understand. But if they speak in chunks, I want to go to the store on Monday, then it's much easier to understand. And putting that emphasis there, Monday, the word that's most important, and maybe using some body language. Of course, you don't always have to use body language. If you're talking to your husband or wife or partner, you know, you don't have to say Monday unless you're correcting them. I said Monday and not Tuesday, but sometimes you would use some body language. Okay, next one. Okay, the mirroring phase. So we'll take a look at this. Next slide. Okay, now is what we call practicing the transcript. So it's important, the student doesn't just watch the video and automatically, you know, sound like the native speaker. You have to set up a series of stages. And so what we call this is read, look up, and say. So what I do for my students, or they do for themselves even better, is write a short script of that 30 seconds in large font, one thought group or chunk per line, and then they mark the pronunciation feature. So for example, the emphasis. You don't have to worry about anything else unless you want to go further, but that. And so now Lucia is going to tell you about what she did, because she did this with her model speakers. So go ahead, Lucia.
Thank you, Colleen. So, okay, after we saw Colleen presentation, I think like 2 months ago, so we asked first Colleen if she wants to be part of one workshop from OLC, and she said yes. So thank you, Colleen, for that. And after that, we say, okay, Amy and I, we were discussing like maybe we want to be part of this project, and we wanted to do a project like this, the mirroring project. And so I asked one of my tutors if they can help me to do the mirroring project. So we like at the first step, we choose a model, and we pick Angelina Jolie as a model. And then after that, Colleen helped me with the script. Like, I don't know if you can see it over there. And so I will play the video in the Angelina Jolie part. So she will start here, where you can see the arrow over there. And Miriam Pergament, I don't know if Miriam, are you there, Miriam? Or I cannot see in the participants. So Miriam was the tutor who helped me out to do this project with me. And we spent like 3 weeks doing that. We couldn't finish the whole version of the video, but we go to the, I think, step 2, Colleen. And so first, I would like to just to see the video from Angelina Jolie, but at the same time looking to the script, so you can see the things like Colleen mentioned about the script and the emphasize in each word.
I have never understood why some people are lucky enough to be born with the chance that I had to have this path in life, and why across the world there's a woman just like me with the same abilities and the same desires, same work ethic and love for her family, who would most likely make better films and better speeches. Only she sits in a refugee camp, and she has no voice. She worries about what her children will eat, how to keep them safe, and if they'll ever be allowed to return home. I don't know why this is my life, and that's hers. I don't understand that, but I will do as my mother asked, and I will do the best I can with this life to be of use. And to stand here today means that I did as she asked, and if she were alive, she'd be very proud. So thank you.
Okay, so then, Colleen, should I show the next slide? Yes?
Yes, so yeah, so just to comment again here, the words that are in capital letters are perhaps the emphasized ones, although again, this isn't always an exact science. And then the underlined part is the actual syllable that gets stressed. So we don't say understood, but we say understood. So I've underlined that part of the word so that the student knows where to make that little car like we were talking about. So the bus would be understood, but it would be, the car would be stood, that part of that whole word, if that makes sense. So anyway, I don't want to say anything more there, but if you have questions, feel free to ask now or later. Okay, so go ahead, Lucia.
So here we have like the video that we prepare, my tutor Miriam and I, for you today. And I think we couldn't like do the final version, but we need to spend like a more time doing this. But at the end, well, I will tell you after where were the challenge and the things that I learned from this mirroring project. And but I think for me it was a real challenge. I have never like done this before. Was the first time, and for me it was like a very rewarding just to record myself, and then after that I can clearly see my errors, my mistakes, and after that I say, oh yeah, so that's what, oh yes, I did wrong. Oh, this is the bad pronunciation. I couldn't do. I didn't did the things that my tutor asked me. So I think it was like I learned a lot about this. So okay, so don't laugh about me. I will I will play it. I have never understood why some people are lucky enough to be born with the chance that I had to have this path in life, and why across the world there's a woman just like me with the same abilities and the same desires, same work ethic, love for her family, who will most likely make better films, better speeches. Only she sits in a refugee camp. She has no voice. She worries about her children would eat, how to keep them safe, and if they ever be allowed to return home. I don't know why this is my life and that's hers. I don't understand that, but I will do as my mother asked, and I will do the best I can with this life to be used. And to stand here today means that I did as she asked. And if she were alive, she would be very proud. So thank you for that. Okay. So any comments, Colleen, here, or do you want? Oh, let me on.
Sorry, I'm muted. I was going to say I'd like you to say something first, and then I'll jump in after you comment on what you think. What were the challenges for you? Yeah, somebody, Kristen says, that brought tears. Beautifully done. Yes. So Lucia, what would you say?
So, okay, so the first thing is like I don't like to record myself. I feel like I'm very ashamed for that because I don't want to see your mistakes, right? But I think for me, I am not an. It's very clear. It's very obvious that I'm not English native speaker. English native speaker. So for me to see all my errors after I replay the video, I just feel like, oh my God, I have to work harder in the pronunciation and the intonation and the rhythm, because, the words are different the pronunciation is completely different. And so you have to emphasize some words. You cannot say it like with the same tone every time. So that's why I say, okay, now I can see it's better to record myself. But of course, I cannot do it every time that I speak, right? So this is like, that was for me, it's like, oh, see myself again and to see my mistakes now I feel better. I don't want to see the video when I'm speaking, but I think it was very rewarding for me. The thing that I don't know, I wanted to mention is like it's you have to spend time doing this. Like you have to really be focused on this, and so sometimes I think that I don't have enough time to do it, but at least I try it, and so it was like a very fun, and it I learned something about this.
Can I jump in now? I just wanted to say my comments are similar to what I've seen in the chat. I totally agree. You did a great job. This was just the first stage. It's not the final version, but you did a great job. Somebody said you brought tears to their eyes. And I think it's also important. The purpose for doing this is not so much to see your errors, but to see your progress and to see what you're doing well. Because again, remember, you know, native speaker is not our goal here. I mean, for some people it might be, but we want to get to the level where people can understand us well enough. And so if you can say, oh, now people can understand better. Because I think here, Lucia, your pausing was good. You were giving some good emphasis. So it's important to focus on that. Not what you're doing incorrectly. Sure, maybe to a certain extent, but more so what you're doing well. Okay. Let's go on to the next slide where you get the feedback from Miriam.
What is after life? With this life?
With this life?
With
this life? With
okay.
This life? With the same abilities and
okay.
the same.
It was just the with that I was questioning.
Okay, with the same abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And the last sentence was, I did as she asked.
You did good there.
And if she were alive, she would be.
Would. It's like it's like if it's WOOD.
Yes, she would be very proud. So thank you for that. That. She will be very proud. So thank you for that.
Okay, so go ahead, Lucia. Do you want to say anything here?
Just like I found myself that I cannot pronounce the D at the end. D is very difficult to, I don't know why, maybe it's on me but I was all the time I was thinking like my D or the verbs in past I was pronouncing right. I remember, but no, I always missing the D at the end. So okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, some of the endings in English are difficult for Spanish speakers. So one thing is that if you look at the two languages, someone is writing on the screen here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Why is that happening? Any idea? Oh, there, it's gone. Okay. Yeah, it is. Yeah, in another session, maybe we can talk about that. But Spanish and English, Ds are made in different places in the mouth. And that might be one thing that is tricky. So those of you who teach Spanish speakers, you can see something on the internet, but this I have from a long time ago, that many of the sounds, I don't know if you can see this, but many of the sounds in English are on this tooth ridge. So da 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 da. So for example, if you said would, well, actually, it's here, but in Spanish, many of those sounds are on the teeth themselves. Would, okay, or like dedo, so like finger in Spanish. And so one thing might be just, pointing out some of those differences. But that's getting down to the nitty gritty, which is fine if it interferes with understanding. But I would say if you get those buses and some of those cars and the pausing, that's going to help a lot. And so if you have a mistake in an individual sound, it may not be as important unless it interferes with meaning. So for example, at the end, Angelina Jolie says, no voice. If someone says, no boys, okay, there, if you substitute the B sound and you say no boys, somebody might be confused. And so that's where you need to have that sound, the V, correct, because it carries the meaning there. So anyway, okay, so let's keep going. So the next step then is the trial version. So if Lucia were doing this, then she would memorize the script and then do a trial version. So I tell my students it's like writing a paper. You don't just sit down and write something and hand it in, but you might write it and then you might go back and think about, okay, now do I want to say something different? What do I need to change here? And so that's what they do in the project as well. So they will perform it in front of a tutor. The tutor or the other students will give feedback and then it will be recorded. I know, like Lucia said, she doesn't like seeing herself on video, and who does? I mean, if anybody here likes seeing themselves on video, raise your hand. I certainly don't, and it's happened a lot. But it's important because it's a way for you to grow. And after a while, you learn to say, okay, I'm not going to pay attention to my hair and some of these other things, but I'm going to pay attention to how I'm using my body, how I'm speaking. And that's what the focus is. And make sure that it's good enough, not perfect, but good enough. And as Kristen said, Lucia's performance brought tears to her eyes. I mean, I think that's pretty good, especially for the first time. Okay, next one. Next slide, sorry. Then there's the final version. And for the final version is when you add everything together. So the speech, the body language, the emotion. And so it's kind of like layers in a cake. We do one thing and then we add another and another and another. And it might seem like, oh, this is so tedious, but actually it's not so tedious. There are a couple of stages where you keep practicing and then you get to the final product. So let's go on to the next slide and let's see the student. This is actually my student who was mirroring Shakira. And so I'd like you to see what she did. And this was during Zoom. So we were recording at home. And this is the video by Shakira that she did that we watched early on. So go ahead. Hopefully you remember it. If not, we can go back and watch it.
When I was around 8 years old, I remember I saw kids who, instead of being in school, they were already working in the streets. Kids like me. They were barefoot in the park. So kids like me who
Okay, so let's see, where are we?
I forgot.
Whose reality was completely different. Yeah.
Yeah. whose reality was completely different than mine, only because of the circumstances into which they were born. It was really hard for me to accept that something so unjust didn't have a solution. There has to be something that could be done.
Yeah, good. Okay, so I wanted to show that because it is difficult, and if the student, gets stuck, just help them, just give them the phrase, and that's fine. I mean, that happens all the time. We make mistakes, and it's not the end of the world. Here, this other person here is another teacher, and she was observing. She wanted to see the project, but I thought my student did a pretty good job of imitating Shakira, some of the body language, the pausing, etc. One thing is, Lucia, if you can turn up the volume. This student of mine has difficulty speaking loudly. I won't go into it because it's something that's challenging for her. But I think if the video sound can be a little louder, that'll help. But that's the final version where she imitated Shakira. And then, Lucia, can we go on to the next slide?
Of course.
Okay, so the final step in the project is what's called channeling. And this is where the student takes what he or she has learned and applies it to their own speech. Okay, so go ahead. They write a short script, again, 30 seconds or less. They try to be the model speaker. They practice and then they perform for the tutor. Okay, so we'll see my student M doing that. So let's look at the next slide. Okay, so channeling, again, is speaking in a way in which you try to be a speaker whom you have mirrored. And just to give you the context, M was trying to talk about migrant caravans from Central America to the US, why that was happening. And so in the chat, I'd like you to, well, first of all, of course, listen and then say, how is M trying to be Shakira? And again, Lucia, if you can turn up the volume, that would be great. Okay, so go ahead.
In recent years, people often ask me about the caravans from Central America and why do kids come to the United States by themselves. This is a topic that touched me deeply because I'm a mother and because I'm from Central America. In the past 5 years, thousands of people, including kids and teenagers, started to walk miles and miles, some of them with only flip-flops on their feet and plastic bags in their hands.
Okay, so in the chat, right, how is M trying to be Shakira? So what do you see that's similar from Shakira? Does anybody want to see Shakira again, or do you remember well enough? Hopefully you remember well enough. Okay, so go ahead and write some things in. Okay, I'll start sharing and we can talk about this. Okay, so great word stress and related gestures. Yes, she was gesturing for the stressed or accented syllable. Effective chunking, so speaking in phrases. Talking about children in difficult situations. Yes, very similar theme there. Short phrases with effective pauses, showing lots of passion for the subject. Yes, the passion really comes through. You can tell that it's something that's near and dear to her heart. Hand gestures, although at a certain point it was out of sync, but I think you could tell for most of it. Spacing of words, emphasis on word thoughts, eye contact, and appropriate gestures. Just a second, our kitty is here. I need to put her down here. Just a second. Speaking slowly with lots of emotion, full depth of emotion, sincerity, quiet yet visible passion. Speaking about a lived reality. Yes. Let's see if there's anything else that I would add. Yeah, I think those are mainly the areas that I would talk about as well. And so here she's not saying the same thing as Shakita, but she's trying to speak and share her own ideas. Okay, go ahead, Lucia. Okay, so the take home, we're at the end now, so hopefully we'll have a few minutes for questions. Consider the choice of models for your context. That's important. Involve your learners if you can, although don't feel like you have to. Remember, it's a process. It's not just, okay, now imitate what this person said. And channeling, use what they learned in their own words. Okay, and I think, Lucia, go ahead. Okay, handouts. We've just got some handouts for you. I don't need to go through this slide. Next slide, Lucia. Okay, and we've also got some resources and links here that will help you. And again, you can look at that later. We can share the slides with you. And the very last one, I think, is here. Oh, for lower level students, people have asked about that. So if you've got a literacy, beginning literacy or low beginning English language learner, the mirroring project may not be appropriate. But if you have a high beginning English language learner, it could be possible. And as I mentioned, I've got some materials that you could use. And the next slide, Lucia. Okay, and feel free to email me with questions or comments. Just a second. Orland, can you get Lizzie? Okay, I just had to put the cat in the other room. Okay, so right now we have about 5 minutes. If anybody has questions or comments, I know it's been a long hour and a half and you're probably tired, but we do have a few minutes for questions. You can either type them in the chat or you can ask them. Okay, bye-bye, Sarah. Julie. So how many people think that they might try this? I know it's early and you just saw it, but yeah, I can see some people raising their hand. That's great. And I was so pleased to see that Lucia tried it and she worked with Miriam. And maybe I should also ask, how many people have already done something like this? If you want to put in the chat or if you want to raise your hand. Because we were going to say that you could write up something. If you've already done it, you could either share now or you could write up something for the newsletter and share how you've used the project. Or if you do the project now, you could write about it later and maybe share some tips, some things that worked well, or if something didn't work well. And here somebody said, I think it might be particularly good for advanced students. Yes, thanks for bringing that up, Tom. I've used it in the past with advanced students, but I've also used it with, and my colleague, Suzanne McCurdy, we ran out of time, so we didn't get a chance to view some of her videos, but she's used this with lower level and intermediate students. And so when we share the PowerPoint, you'll be able to see examples of what she did with those lower level students. She did that though with a class, so it was a little bit different, but the techniques that she used, you could adapt to your own situation. So, but thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, and somebody said, Bill said, we do shadowing, which is effective, and this takes it much further. Yeah. So yes, okay, well, Lucia, do you want to say anything then about where they're going to find the materials or whatever?
Yes, so okay, so thank you for being here today. And also we were recording this video, so you can see this video after if you wanted to see it again in our YouTube channel. And also you will receive the handouts for the mirroring project. And also Colleen will receive all the questions from the participants, and she will respond via email. And also I think we just on time. And so I want to sorry for the beginning, like we were sharing, Lori, Colleen, and I at the same time the screen, and we couldn't got the right audio for the first video. But I will send you again also the link for the YouTube just to see it again. And so thank you for being here. And if you want to add something else, please just put it in the chat. And thank you, Colleen. It was wonderful having you here today. And you are the expert here for the mirroring. And thank you for all the help here. So
well, I was going to say, Lucia, thank you so much for being willing to participate and do the read, look up, and say, share your video, and also share the video of Miriam giving you feedback. I think that's just awesome. And so I want to thank you for that, because there's nothing that warms my heart more than seeing somebody say, okay, I'm going to undertake this. And if you run into glitches, again, feel free to contact me or maybe Lucia. Hopefully, Lucia, you'll finish your project, and maybe in the future we can see you mirroring Angelina.
Yes,
So,
with the dress,
yes.
all dressed up and everything. Yeah, and
Yes,
the makeup,
microphone and everything. Yes, exactly. So,
yes.
okay, yeah.
So thank you. So thank everybody to be here. So I will stop recording the video and see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Okay, so I will. Um,
Yeah, Lucia, do you want to talk just a little bit about how it went? Or are you busy? Maybe you're busy right now.
it's not. I have a few minutes to
Okay.
talk with you. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it looks like Susan is still on though, so maybe we need to allow her to leave. Yeah, so any comments about how it went? How do you think they responded to it?
Stop recording.
Oh yeah, it's still recording.